being attacked in all forms in our society, but especially biblical truth. And while there are times and occasions where biblical truth is attacked from outside the church, majority of it's coming from inside the church itself. And that's a sad reality. Now, Jude has been warning us that spiritual terrorists have infiltrated the church. But he's warning us, hey, look, they don't wear signs saying, look out for me, I'm a terrorist. They act like us, they talk like us, they sound like everybody else. They're not distinguished, they don't give their appearance away. But really, they're comfortably hiding their real identity. They look for opportunities to go up the ladders of and position themselves within the church. They raise doubts about the Word of God. They'll undermine its authority. They'll create havoc. And what Jude is saying is if they're not dealt with, they'll wreck the churches they're in. And once they've done that, they move on to another unsuspecting church, and it starts all over again. They implement their strategies and their philosophies. And Jude has been warning the church, be on alert. He's given out principles and examples of what these spiritual terrorists get up to, how we can identify them. And tonight we find that one verse we're dealing with, woe to them, they have taken the way of Cain, they have rushed for profit into Balaam's error, they have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. And that's basically all I'm going to look at tonight. And those pictures tell us a little bit about what we're doing. And the first one, as we break it down, is this. Cain, I did it my way. Woe to them, they have taken the way of Cain. Now, many, if you like, of the modern day spiritual terrorists follow the examples of Cain in that they do things their own way. They have eagerly rushed into the error of Balaam in a pursuing what's in it for me attitude. How can I use my influence to get what I want? And they've pursued the pattern of Korah, who demanded that I'll get what I want. And as a result, he perished because of his rebellion against God. And it doesn't take rocket science to work out there's a natural progression that these people follow that will lead them to destruction. It just varies in speed and in degree according to the individuals themselves. But they all must start somewhere. And just like Cain, they're determined to do things their own way. They do not like being told what to do. They don't like being told how to do things. This is a person who is intent on disobeying and disregarding God. This is then followed by someone who desires to be like Balaam, who tries to influence people to disobey God, well, if you like, making a quick buck at the people's expense. It doesn't take long for the final step to be like Korah, who led a full-scale rebellion against God because he was determined to get what he wanted, no matter what the cost was. And Jude knows that his Jewish readers would have been familiar with these three examples because it's been recorded in their history as what not to do. So we're going to read Genesis 4, and if you've got your Bibles you can do that. Genesis 4 verses 1 to 15, and I'll put it up so you can follow. Adam had sexual relationships with his wife Eve. She became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. Eve said, with the Lord's help, I've given birth to a man. After that, Eve gave birth to Cain's brother Abel. Abel took care of flocks. Cain became a farmer. Later, Cain brought some food from the ground as a gift to God. Abel brought the best parts from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. So Cain became very angry and felt rejected. The Lord asked Cain, why are you angry? Why do you look so unhappy? If you do things well, I'll accept you. But if you do not do them well, sin is ready to attack you. Sin wants you, but you must rule over it. Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let us go out into the field." While they were out in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Later the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain answered, "I don't know. Is it my job to take care of my brother?" Then the Lord said, "What have you done? Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground, and now you'll be cursed in your work with the ground, the same ground where your brother's blood fell and where your hands killed him. You'll work the ground, but it will not grow good crops for you anymore, and you'll wander around on the earth." Then Cain said to the Lord, "This punishment is more than I can stand. Today you'll force me to stop working the ground, and now I must hide from you. I must wander around on the earth, and anyone who meets me can kill me." The Lord said to Cain, "No, if anyone kills you, I will punish that person 7 times more." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain, warning anyone who met him not to kill him. Wow. This is the way of Cain. And the story's simple. Cain decided to bring a sacrifice to God, a sacrifice that he knew was unacceptable, but he did it anyway. His brother Abel also brought a sacrifice that was acceptable to God, indicating to me that both the brothers understood what God's requirements were when they brought their sacrifices or offerings to God. When it talks about the way of Cain, it means Cain wasn't interested in doing things God's way. He would do things his own way. He rejected God's ways and did whatever he felt like. In other words, he was a person who wasn't going to limit himself in what he did. He would invent his own worship style. He wasn't going to be told how to do things and how they were to be done. And he certainly wasn't going to follow the rules. If you like, he was a freeborn spirit, had his own way of doing things, so he defied what God required and his instructions. That's why I say they both knew what God required. But Cain said, "No, I'll do it my way. I'm not going to follow that way." Our text shows his character. It shows his heart was not right, which led him to do the wrong things. He became disobedient, and then to top it off, he allowed his anger to control him to the point of murdering his own brother Abel. The pathway is there for all to see. Cain allows sin to dominate him. He allows his will to become the dominating factor. He doesn't care about anyone or anything but himself. He doesn't like to be under anyone's authority except his own, and he feels he has the right to do whatever he wants without restrictions being placed upon him. This is the way of Cain. Submission doesn't exist as far as he's concerned. He will do whatever he wants and take out whoever stands in his way, even if it's his own brother. He doesn't care about human life, and he'll bend the rules to get what he wants. If you like, Cain is a pioneer for modern-day spiritual terrorists. He paved the way in his dealings with God. He paved the way in his rebellious spirit against authority. He paved the way with his disobedience to do what he was told and his willingness to take shortcuts to get his own way. He takes no prisoner's attitude. His anger rules when he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. His hatred rages against those who do the right thing and follow God's instructions, who stand on his truth, and he will resort to murder if any of those oppose him. Now, make no mistake, Cain is a religious person, but he's a religious person on his own terms. He makes a token effort at some offering to give to God that he feels acceptable. So what that tells me, he doesn't mind getting close to people who stand on the truth, but it doesn't take long for him to become hostile and antagonistic towards them by challenging them with his own philosophies and opinions. The way of Cain doesn't end well for him. he was banished from the garden, a mark was placed on his head identifying him for what he was. And the people could not kill him. Instead, he lived a life separated from God and his blessings. So the way of Cain, he invented his own God. And that God was someone of his own imagination, in his own image. He believed he could worship God any way he wanted, which, when you read the scriptures, is idolatry. Cain's way, I did it my way. So the mark of Cain, where they all start, is I do it my way. I have my own way to do things, and I'm not going to listen to anybody else. And I wonder, as we think about Christendom, have we run across preachers and ministers who will not listen to anybody but themselves? And you find out they've wrecked their ministry. The way of Cain. I did it my way. Then we go to the next person that's mentioned. Balaam, what's in it for me? They have rushed for profit into Balaam's error. Now, this is the second example in the progression from doing it my way to what's in it for me. How can I benefit from others? Now, there's always been a saying when I was growing up, there's two ways to make money. Can anyone remember what they are? Politics and religion. They're the two ways to make money. Politics and religion. And that is the main reason that these terrorists, spiritual terrorists, stay in it. In religion, it's lucrative. It provides opportunities for you to influence people to do the wrong thing, while at the same time, you fleece them for everything you can. Wow. You think, is that possible? Yes, it is. It happens regularly. In some of these, well, there's been reports and we've read scandals of people who have been wolves in sheep's clothing who have fleeced the flock while taking advantage and influencing people. In other words, I call them terrorists for hire, because that's what Balaam was. They're looking for a comfortable life without having to do much. And religion, let me tell you, offers job opportunities that a normal life doesn't. And they encounter people who are easy pickings for their scams. Now, the account of Balaam, and I'm not going to put it up, is covered in Numbers chapter 22 through 25. It's the account of Balaam. Even in chapter 31, you find a summary of who he was and what he did. But let me just tell you, just a summary of his life. Chapters 22 through 25. He was a prophet for hire. In other words, he would sell his services to the highest bidder. And you know what? His services didn't come cheap. He had a reputation for getting you what you wanted, and when it came to getting a favourable prophecy, he was your man. That's who you went to. Now, Israel at that time had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. They were about to enter the promised land, but were encountering pockets of resistance from people who were resisting their advance. And in particular, the scriptures mention a group called the Moabites. And the king of the Moabites was a man named Balak. And he decided to try and hire Balaam and use his services to get this so-called prophet to put a curse on God's people, Israel, because he believed that was the only way to stop Israel from advancing in his territory. Put a curse on him. Now, why he didn't put him on himself, I don't know, but he thought he'd better get a prophet, you know. You get the top guy and you hire him and pay him the money and let him do the dirty work. Now, Balaam was a prophet for hire, but one thing he loved more than anything else was money. That was his weakness. Even though he had some knowledge about the God of the Bible, and he feared him just a little bit. His desire for money overpowered any common sense that he may have had. Remember, the scriptures tell us that he had an encounter with his donkey. Remember, God can use a donkey to speak to people, and he spoke to Balaam on this account. And he was told in no uncertain terms by God, you cannot curse my people. You're not allowed. And it was through the donkey. Now, I will say Balaam had enough common sense then to back off and understand, I better not play with fire here. I better not put a curse on God's people. You would think, hey, lesson learned, got it. I won't have anything more to do with it. But he didn't. The thought of losing that money for his services continued to drive him on. So he came up with an alternate plan where he could still get his money, but not be directly involved in putting a curse on Israel. But he's still going to collect his pay. Wow. So what did he do? He came up with a wonderful plan. He went to the Moabite women. He persuaded them, hey, look, you women, seduce the Israeli men, engage them in sexual activity, lead them astray to worship idols. You might say, well, how's that going to get his money? Clever. His thinking was simple. I cannot directly curse God's people. But you know what? I can get these women to do the dirty work for me and influence them towards idolatry, where their God will have no other choice but to bring down a curse upon them. He'll have to punish them because they're not following his ways and they're involved in immorality and idolatry. What a wonderful idea. Sneaky. The sad thing is, his plan worked a treat, because that's exactly what happened. Balaam is a man that's motivated by greed. He's a man who knew better, a man who had some understanding about God and his ways. Yet here he is, encouraging others to do the wrong thing while he profits from them. Balaam is given another mention in Revelation 2:14, where it says, but I have few things against you. You have some there who follow the teaching of Balaam. He taught Balak how to cause the people of Israel to sin by eating food offered to idols and taking part in sexual sins. So what Jude is saying here to his readers is this. You already know about these things. You know how Balaam seduced the people of Israel into immorality and idolatry. This is a person who will use you. This is a person who will influence you to do the wrong thing. Why? Because he loves money. He makes money from you. You know this. There are many modern day Cains who want their own way, who are intent on inventing their own way of religion. Oh, of course, they put twists on the truth, interpreting the Bible in a way they want it to favour them, while at the same time denying the truth of the Bible itself. And just the same, there are many modern day Balaams who seduce people through their lives by presenting false gods, false religions that appeal to their physical appetites so they can make money from them. Their thinking is the world is their oyster, so to speak. They see the world as theirs for the taking. There are many opportunities to make their fortunes from so many gullible people who can be hoodwinked and taken for a ride simply by appealing to their senses and appetites. The way of Balaam. It leads into error. So we've got Cain, we've got Balaam, and we've got the last one. Korah, I will have it. They have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. This is the final step of progression. It's outright rebellion and opposition against all authority with a determination to get what they want at any cost. Now here we use the example of Korah and his sons. And there's a word that's used here, antilogia, which means literally to go against the word. You'll notice the progression. Cain disobeys God. Balaam opposes God. Korah rebels against God. In other words, in the three cases, they do not like the word of God. They have no desire to be under its authority. So what do? They deny it, they reject it, they oppose it wherever they can. Now I'm going to put up the account so you can read it yourself. In Numbers 16, 1 through 3. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and On turned against Moses. Korah was the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. Dathan and Abiram were brothers, the sons of Eliab, and On was the son of Peleth. Dathan, Abiram, and On were from the tribe of Reuben. These men gathered 250 other Israelite men, well-known leaders chosen by the community, and challenged Moses. They came as a group to speak to Moses, and Aaron said, "You've gone too far. All the people are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. So why do you put yourselves above all the people of the Lord?" Now that is quite a statement. But here's a group of people led by Korah, challenging the authority of Moses. Now, Korah was a Levite. He had the responsibility to take care of the temple. His responsibility was pretty simple: take care of worship. He would have known what the requirements are, what God expected. So he's got no excuse to take the law into his own hands and challenge God, because God had already put in place what was acceptable regarding the worship and how things were to be done. And he had a spokesperson there who was his representative. So Korah understood what was required. And I can't help but notice when you see the three examples of Cain, of Balaam, and Korah, they all had religious responsibilities. Cain, along with his brother, had been instructed by God about what he was to bring as an offering in worship. Balaam was a prophet, certainly knew what to do as he was supposed to speak for God. And Korah was a Levite, a cousin of Moses. But it seems that Korah had been excluded from being a priest. And maybe this was where the resentment took place. Maybe this is what put the fire in his belly to rebel against the very thing he couldn't have himself or become. Now, it doesn't take long for the fires of rebellion to spread among the people. It only took a couple of friends to spread some discontent among the tribes and their leaders. And before you know it, you've got a delegation of 250 plus leaders who come up to Moses and said, "You've gone too far this time. What gives you the right to tell us what to do?" Now understand, this is a proven strategy of spiritual terrorists. You take out the leader and they believe everyone will fall into line with the prescribed agenda that's being promoted by these people. And they knew and understood Moses was a man to target. If they were to be successful, they had to confront. They had to get rid of Moses. He was God's chosen representative. That was the bottom line. Moses had to go if they were successful. Now you'll notice Korah's ploy, his strategy if you like. Moses, who do you think you are? You're not superior to everyone here. Every one of us is holy. Every one of us is equal. So why do you put yourself on a pedestal and think you can tell us what to do? Now, I'm ad-libbing here, but I can guess the interchange that's going on. Moses, I've got a news flash for you, mate. We don't have to listen to you. We all have opinions and ideas that are just as good as yours. So we don't need you telling us what to do and why we need to do it. We're all equal. We don't need a leader. We don't need someone who is special to tell us what to do. Moses, We're putting you on notice. You're not our leader. We want all the people to have a say in this, and you'll find out that you're not the right one to demand us to do anything. After all, we're all holy before God. You're not the only holy one who has a mortgage on this thing. Wow. Now that's the way of a spiritual terrorist. You are not the only one who has this right. You're not the only one who has this power. You're not the only one who has this authority to tell us what to do and how to do it. We're all equal in God's sight. We don't need someone like you telling us what to do. We're entitled to our viewpoints and opinions just as you are, and they're just as valid. Our opinions are just as valid as yours, and just as equal. So we do not recognize your spiritual authority over us, Moses, and we're not going to do what you say. How do you like them apples, Moses? Wow. You see, the strategy is to take on and attack any person in the place of spiritual authority. You remove them from those positions of influence and you replace them with your own power and authority. So you whip up a group of people and you get them to disagree with the leaders. You mount a rebellion against them. If you like, you establish a Me Too movement. You see those on Me Too? You can do anything that continues to gather public opinion and momentum, and it's designed to bring down the established authority so there's a vacuum that must be filled, and this is what they're waiting for and creating. Now, when we look at the scriptural account, we see that this rebellion didn't take off as planned, and the outcome was less than satisfactory for the would-be rebellion by these leaders. And we know, as we continue to read, in chapter 16, verses 28 to 35, that Moses said, "Now you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these things. It was not my idea. If these men die a normal death, the way men usually die, then the Lord did not really send me. But if the Lord does something new, you'll know they've insulted the Lord. The ground will open up and swallow them. They'll be buried alive and will go to the place of the dead, and everything that belongs to them will go with them." When Moses finished saying these things, the ground under the men split open. The earth opened and swallowed them and all their families. All Korah's men and everything they owned went down. They were buried alive, going to the place of the dead, and everything they owned went with them. Then the earth covered them. They died and were gone from the community. The people of Israel around them heard their screams and ran away, saying, "The earth will swallow us too." Then a fire came down from the Lord and destroyed the 250 men who presented the incense. Isn't that a way to deal with rebellion? But you wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of the coin, would you? You can't say, "Oh, hang on, I've got second thoughts about this. I changed my mind." No. You see, the ground opened up and swallowed these agitators who attacked Moses and the authority as God's representative. Now, it might seem a bit dramatic, but an example has been made, because the fires of rebellion can grow out of control unless they are quenched very quickly. Now, we know that Korah and his 250 men and their families who stood in rebellion against Moses were destroyed. But you know what? The effect of their rebellion continued after their demise among the people of Israel. Because the people of Israel, as you read, continue to complain to Moses, "Hey, you've killed God's people." This wasn't right as far as they were concerned. Something had to be done. Now, this is what they thought, that Moses was responsible for killing God's people and their families. And God wasn't too pleased. Now, I'm summarising here, but you can read it yourself. He wasn't too pleased with the reaction of the people to what had happened. So he sent a terrible sickness among the people. And as a result, there were nearly 15,000 people died as a result. Now, how did it all start? Because of Korah's rebellion. Korah's rebellion to take away Moses' authority had influenced so many people to become actively involved in the process, and it cost them their lives. They had become a law unto themselves. They had not thought through the consequences. They believed they were right, but they wouldn't listen to anyone else. You see the progression with these three examples? It starts with one person who wants his own way. It escalates to one other person influencing others, and finally another person influencing a whole group of people to rebel. And it comes down to a question of how these people will influence other people to stand against the truth and not see what's really going on. In other words, how is it possible for people like this to get in positions and hoodwink God's people so they don't see there's another agenda? They don't see what's really taking place. And you might think, well, people aren't that stupid. Sorry, but they are. As human beings, we're trusting too much of things that we see for ourselves rather than understanding and discerning there's a spiritual warfare that's going on here. In Jewish history, these men were known, as I call them, the three amigos, whose desire was to influence people to turn away from God, to turn away from the truth and embrace something new and exciting, something that would bring them prosperity and position no matter the cost. They stand out as examples of spiritual terrorists and what happens to them in the end. And the question I ask, and what Jude asks, is it worth it? Is it worth it? At the beginning of verse 11 it says, woe to them, meaning woe to Cain, woe to Balaam, woe to Korah. It's inclusive of all those that Jude has mentioned in these first 10 verses. These men, verse 10, these men, verse 8, certain men, verse 4. And what it means is God has declared their end and will not tolerate their rebellion and opposition. Now we know from Scripture, John 14:6. Can anyone remember that? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Very clearly, it's defined. Yet these spiritual terrorists have exchanged Christ's way for the way of Cain. I'll do it my way. They have exchanged the truth of Christ for the error of Balaam, for what I can get from life. They've exchanged the life of Christ for the destruction of Korah, who was determined to get what he wanted at any cost. As we've seen in Jude, so far these people in verse 4 have been marked for destruction. Verse 5, they were destroyed in Israel, and sinful angels have been kept in chains. Verse 13 says darkness has been reserved for them, and verses 14 and 15 describes the judgment that is waiting for them. Jude has carefully crafted a portrait of what examples of spiritual terrorists are in the past. And he's done so for our example, so that we can see that, hey, these are prominent people that you know about in your history. Where did it get them? Was it worth it? Be careful. Pay attention. Know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Remember, it's not your truth that sets you free, it's God's truth. That's the key that sets you free. And so